coming into parts of Aberdeenshire. Still a risk of some quite heavy showers further west, but generally that's where the best chance of any sunshine across parts of Scotland is later on today. And sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland, as well as some heavy downpours. Now in Wales, the west coast is where we'll see the best of the sunshine. Further inland, a risk of some cloudier skies, and across the south coast as well, a mix of cloudy skies and outbreaks of rain. And it's overnight tonight across southern areas where that rain will start to turn quite heavy. There is a weather warning in force for all of Thursday. Now, the heavy rain will likely last all the way through Friday and into Saturday as well, actually. So we could see quite a lot of rain falling across southern areas. That may bring some trouble on the roads first thing on Thursday, but it's further north where things start to become more settled. So a drier night across parts of northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a fine start to the day on Thursday across these areas. And there'll be plenty of sunshine too, and it'll feel fairly warm in that sunshine. Highs of around 21 or 22 degrees across western Scotland, northwestern England. Further south, though, much fresher and damper day.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 4th of September. I'm Dawn Neeson, and I'm joined by Mark Dolan this afternoon. Mark, lovely to work with you.
It's lovely to work with you, and I wish it wasn't in the context of such sombre news. Of course, the Grenfell Tower inquiry has made its findings public, and it makes for terrible reading, Dawn. I mean, essentially, the question on the tip of everyone's tongues is who's to blame? Well, it seems everyone. It's various governments of all political stripes over decades. The architects, the cladding manufacturers, building control, the local authority. It's been an abject failure. And of course, Dawn, one of the great tragedies to befall this country, the history of this country, one of the worst single tragedies since the Second World War.
You know what, it seems incredible, Mark. It was the 14th of June 2017 that fire broke out, 24-storey Grenfell Tower in North Kensington, London. It burned for 60 hours, 70 people died, and 2 people at the scene and 2 people died later. Yeah. And it seems incredible that we are now in 2024 and we still don't have answers about who was responsible. And these people are grieving, and we have had the result of the second part of the inquiry today. You have heard this morning Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak talking about what they've heard. But what I keep coming back to, Mark, and I think what will really get to these families is that all the deaths were avoidable.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, there is no way round that. You know, the person you loved should not have died. As you say, it was a catalogue of errors from start to finish. And nobody, as the families say, that it was a catalogue. The loved ones say it was greed, corruption and incompetence and negligence that meant our loved ones are no longer with us.
Well, too right, incompetence indeed, bureaucracy, and also dishonesty as well. You know, dishonesty potentially from those manufacturers of the cladding who sat on evidence that those materials were unsafe. Another important question to ask, Dawn, is how many buildings that have this new cladding are still unsafe? There are people listening to or watching this show who may live in a tower block that's clad in this manner. Do they have any right to feel like this tragedy couldn't happen to them? And, of course, the other question, you mentioned the timeline, which is absurd, 2017, but also what about the cost? Almost £350 million so far to mothball that building.
It's there as a memorial to these people that died, and it's impossible to, if you're in London, to go past that tower and not think about all those that lost their life, including many, many children.
But Dawn, £250 million to mothball that building. How can that be justified? You could have given a portion of that money to the bereaved families or those that needed rehousing. I think it's crazy. Yeah. We do have our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who is at the inquiry. Catherine, a failure across the board, it seems, in regard to this colossal tragedy.
Yes, indeed. 54 adults and 18 children died that day, and the families are still waiting for justice, but at least today they have had some answers. Now, I spent 3 hours wading through the report, some 1,600 pages long, before it was published at 11 o'clock. But a picture of failure, as you say, decades of failure by central government and other bodies in positions of responsibility in the construction industry. Frankly, almost nobody comes well out of this. The inquiry found that there had known about the dangers of using cladding on high-rise buildings as far back as 1991 after the Knowsley Heights fire, and that by 2016 the then Department of Communities and Local Government were well aware of the risks of this cladding. But basically Sir Martin said that there's a combination of failures through incompetence, but in some cases dishonesty and greed. In many instances, people weren't properly trained, they didn't have the capacity, they weren't in the right job. But in some instances, there was deliberate dishonesty and greed, and fingers have been pointed particularly at the architectural firm, the manufacturers of this cladding that knew that there were problems with it but allowed it to be sold, the regulators that should have checked but didn't make the proper checks, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, the tenant management organisation that had a terrible relationship with the tenants, the people living in Grenfell Tower, didn't take their concerns seriously. And of course, the first duty of the state is to keep its citizens safe. Now, we hear that a lot, don't we, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of money to Ukraine, etc., keeping us safe. But this is a domestic matter. These were people who just want to bed one night, the same as all of us do, and were failed massively. You know, the families who lost loved ones were speaking afterwards, and they have said that, you know, this is a first step, a significant chapter, they've called this, but said that justice has still not been delivered. There's another group about to hold a press conference just at the hotel behind me very shortly. We will bring you that live. But listening to one of the families' groups a little bit earlier, they were saying that the inquiry has proved what we already know, that the deaths were avoidable, and we will never give up fighting for you, talking to the loved ones that they lost. Of course, in Parliament, we've had a very sombre and united reaction, as you would expect. The Prime Minister made a private visit to Grenfell and was very moved by that. He has said this day of truth must lead to a day of justice. But I have to say, I've reported on many of these big failures of state, infected blood, Hillsborough, the post office, and so on and so forth. And we see it again and again. Ordinary people let down, ordinary people die. They want justice, they want people to be held to account. The families want people put in jail for this and held properly accountable. Now, we will hear from the police a little bit later. They are going to look in detail at this report. I understand they are investigating 19 organisations and 58 individuals, but in terms of potential criminal prosecutions, it will be late 2026 before those begin in earnest, if indeed they do.
Sorry, Catherine, which means basically charging decisions are unlikely soon, meaning trials may not start until 2027. That's a whole decade after the actual fire. Indeed, it is. It's a hideously long time, isn't it? And meanwhile,
the families who lost loved ones, again, one of the many failures pointed out was the reaction of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, and the total lack of the bandwidth, the ability to deal with a large number of people suddenly being homeless. The report says that many of them felt they'd been just abandoned by the people in power. In fact, really the only group who comes well out of this report, out of this inquiry, who's been given any credit is the local residents, because it says that the local people, the local residents, the local community stepped in where the government, the council, the big organisations failed, gathered round, took people clothing, banded together, voluntary groups, charities. They come out very, very well out of this, but pretty much nobody else does.
Well, indeed, it's egregious that it was departments of state that so categorically failed. Central government, more than one administration, New Labour, the Conservatives, they're all culpable. Prime Minister after Prime Minister failed to tackle this. The local authority involved have a case to answer too. The timeline is extraordinary, as Dawn said, potentially a decade before somebody faces jail. And what about the cost as well? That shocking figure of £340 million spent on the tower to mothball it. Now, it remains an important piece of evidence in terms of what happened, and of course it's a memorial to that great tragedy, but more than a third of £1 billion could and should surely have been better spent on the bereaved families and those who needed rehousing, Catherine.
Well, the thing with the tower itself is, you know, it will seem astonishing to many people that it is still standing, that it wasn't demolished. For years, it stood there bleakly. You can see it for miles around. Now, of course, it's been shrouded in white with a green heart and Grenfell forever in our hearts. But it's incredibly difficult, and there's a huge amount of debate and discussion and disagreement as to what to do with the site, because many people would like some sort of memorial. Many people, many local people would like the tower taken down because they're constantly seeing it. Okay, it's covered over, but it's a continual reminder of the horror of that night and the horror that the community have dealt with for years afterwards. But of course, it's also a mass grave, effectively. This building that's still standing, those 72 people who died, I don't want to go into very upsetting details, but you know, there's remains of people in that building that simply will never be removed. So there's a huge amount of emotion connected with it. So sure, it's a lot of money. It's easy to say, you know, it should have been gone, the money should have been better spent. But to all the families affected, it's a very real, ongoing sort of monument and a cemetery, really.
Catherine, thank you very much. That's Catherine Forster reporting live for us from the second part of the Grenfell inquiry.
Indeed.
Because the first one was 2019, and that concluded that it was a horrific mess from start to finish. Second part concluding the same thing.
Definitely, and this inquiry raises more questions than it answers. Are the people that live in cladded tower blocks now safe, or are they not? You wouldn't have any confidence that those buildings are safe.
No, and lots of people will be out there living in these buildings. So we saw an example in Dagenham recently where a fire went up, a tower block went up because of the cladding. So if you have a story to share, please do get in touch. gbnews.com/yoursay. Lots of you will be affected by this, whether you're living in private accommodation or in council accommodation.
Indeed. Now, from one tragedy to another, we saw several deaths in the Channel yesterday. Absolutely devastating. If that's not an argument for stopping the boats, I don't know what is. However, it hasn't affected numbers today, which continue to be astonishing. It's a big, massive headache. It's a national security disaster for the country. It's a humanitarian disaster, as we discovered yesterday, and it's an economic disaster as well. £8 million a day in the cost of hotels to accommodate people that have entered the country illegally. But wait for this, Dawn. The Channel migrant crisis is our fault, say the French. We'll tackle that next.
Yeah, and you're seeing live pictures of more migrants coming over this morning. Right, OK, we'll have the latest on all of that after this very short break. We'll see you soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Charlie. And this is about Anglican Church, the Church of England, dropping the word church in favour of something a bit more modern sounding. Words such as community. Why are we afraid of the word church?
Well, that's my question. I mean, you've got to assume that they think it solves some kind of problem. But I think, you know, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about their particular religious institution, whatever they all have different names, don't they? And if you rename one, do you have to rename all of them? Can we no longer use an individual name for different religions' community buildings?
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You sound like him. Yeah.
No, certainly.
Oh, don't get any started on me.
Do I believe in a god? Yes. Do I believe in any of the particular gods that are offered to us? Still undecided.
I'm like you. I said exactly that.
You two are the same. You two are exactly
What about you, Anna? Are you particularly religious?
Well, I'm not a proper religious. I wouldn't name myself as a religious, but I really do respect religions. And we have bigger problems to think about.
Is it a sign of where we're at in this secular society?
Yes.
We're moving more and more towards that the Anglican Church feels that the only way to be relevant is to take away any reference to church going, to being religious.
I think if the substance of what you're offering is good, it doesn't matter what it's called. You know, so if people are going to find solace and peace and a place that makes them feel better, they're not going to care too much about what it's called. So I think relabeling it, rebranding it, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but it's going to certainly upset a lot of people, I should think.
And people whose religion is important to them and kind of central to their lives, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
There's a reason Justin Welby is nicknamed by some quarters the Archbishop of Woke. Maybe this adds fuel to the fire, who knows?
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, migrants continue to cross the Channel, despite the news yesterday of a pregnant woman and 6 children being among 12 people who died after their boat sank. This comes as France calls for migrants to be able to claim UK asylum from within the EU. Do we need a complete overhaul so people can be brought here safely and legally?
Well, let's get more with our national reporter, the one and only Charlie Peters. Charlie, there was discussion pre-election about whether Rwanda would be a disincentive. Dying in the Channel appears not to be, because the number's as high as ever today.
Yes, and 8,000 have now crossed since Labour came into power in early July. This morning we've seen 2 boats enter UK waters, be escorted over towards Dover. At least 50 migrants crossing this morning. We saw a boat launching at around 9 a.m. this morning, so 10 a.m. local time in France, which we captured live on GB News. Yeah. And our sources also telling us that a 4th boat is now in the water, approaching the UK waters. So it could be another bumper day for Border Force and for those numbers. We are on track to exceed the figures we saw last year. 29,000 crossed in that period. Some people say it's a small number in comparison to net migration from the year before, but the tragedy of this crossing and the fact that in order to deal with these cases, they are always treated as asylum cases, is giving such a strain on the taxpayer. At least £8 million a day on hotels. And as you were saying, Mark, destruction and the misery of those deaths not appearing to deter many people rushing forward today. So last night we heard from French authorities saying that they believe those caught in that tragedy were Eritrean heritage, and that fits with the recent pattern we've seen of African heritage people running towards the boats when they've already been paid for and dealt with by the smuggling gangs. So people who haven't paid their fare to cross the channel, rushing the boat once it's already been launched. We have also seen a consistent trend of the number of people on each boat going up. These are made-to-order boats now, coming often from China, having the facilities in Turkey being shut down, but they're still being smuggled into northern France. This isn't an amateur operation, as some people think about it. They talk about, oh, those small boat crossings, people coming over on dinghies. No, these are serious, organised criminal enterprises as part of a billion-dollar industry. And when we talk about smashing the gangs, as Sir Keir Starmer wants to, I think we should compare it to the drug trade. Now, how successful has government been at cramping down on that organised criminal gang operation? That is also a £1 billion situation, and the illegals are still getting away with it.
Did we see any French police on the beaches this morning?
Oh, we did.
See live footage. What were they doing?
Well, so the French police have, as part of a funding deal with Britain, they've boosted the number of gendarmerie on the coast. It's about a £500 million deal.
That's what I thought.
They've got drones, they've got specialist night vision goggles. That is forcing more and more migrants to adapt and to overcome the disruption. So more of them are moving south, away from Dunkirk and Calais, into Boulogne-sur-Mer, so a little bit further south on the coast. That makes the journey more perilous. But what can the French authorities do? They can disrupt and prevent the start of a boat approaching the sea.
Can't they fire a dart into a dinghy?
Well, not once it's in the water. This is the thing.
Even if it's shallow water?
Doesn't matter. A lot of them are now being launched from the canals. French authorities, and if you're a low-grade gendarmerie, why would you want the legal risk of going after a boat once it's already in the... Precisely. So they try and disrupt before they launch. And so these smuggling gangs are getting very adept at avoiding counter-surveillance from the French authorities, hiding their boats in dunes, and as we're hearing more and more, launching those crossings further inland. However, at the same time, GBNews sources this morning have told us that some 3,000 people are waiting by the coastline, which is well above average for what we typically expect. So even after the choppy waters of August, as we're seeing this sudden rise in people crossing, there could now be a renewed surge of people attempting the crossing after a recent backlog of attempts.
The political elephant in the room for the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is Rwanda. Can we say that the scrapping of that scheme has impacted these numbers in the last few weeks and months?
There have been some quite compelling newspaper reports from journalists in the camps in and around the areas. Those camps often, by the way, segregated according to the heritage of those there. An Eritrean camp was being cleared by the French authorities in a forest near Boulogne-sur-Mer this morning. A lot of people telling reporters that the change in government has been good for them. Labour, for their part, say that their border security unit will add 1,000 new officers and investigators from the National Crime Agency, working with MI5 and border authorities to deal with the problem. But I think the main political concern will be the comments from the French Interior Minister last night, where he's mentioned that Britain's pull factor is the real problem. This is a long-standing concern coming from France, that Britain is to blame for the crossing.
That we're a soft touch, which is the view of many of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, and that's the second time the French have said that as well, and they have got a point, haven't they? He actually said it's sort of, it's our often work with, if you get over here, you can work without papers, are very rarely expelled.
Yes, well, at the same time, there are also hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants in France, many of them working, but potentially it's the sight of their fellow migrants and people smugglers living in hotels at the taxpayers' expense, circulating on social media, feeding back to family members back home. That is possibly more compelling to migrants making the journey than, say, seeing their loved ones in a camp on the north of France.
So, Charlie, the one thing I have to say, and you've just come back from Germany, haven't you? You've been on holiday in Germany. Refugees who arrive in Germany will be denied benefits if they do so from another country in the European Union, i.e. if they were coming from France to the UK, they could be denied benefits. Now, Germany are saying they are going to do this now. Why can't we do that?
Yeah, well, I suppose that'll be an inter-EU deal, and I think Germany is saying a lot of things that they have to deliver on after recent surges of the AfD, those state elections in Thuringia and Saxony earlier on the weekend. But also, they have actually achieved some of those ambitions. They managed to deport some 28 Afghan asylum seekers back to Afghanistan without a deal with the Taliban, facilitated through Qatar. That's quite a significant achievement.
So the Germans are bowing to political pressure. The rise of the far right is causing mainstream politicians in Germany to wake up and realise that the public are furious about mass migration into their countries. However, what about the UK and the politics of it here? Because in the run-up to the election, it was clearly a concern for Reform UK and Conservative voters, illegal immigration and legal net migration. Not so much for Labour voters. Is there a political price to be paid for Sir Keir Starmer if these illegal crossings continue apace? Is there a political price?
Almost certainly, and I think he has to hope that this border security unit, as it searches for a new commander, and as they add those 1,000 investigators, can achieve that ambition of disrupting and possibly even denying access to the people smuggling gangs, these criminal enterprises. But I think it's really important to stress they are not amateurs. They are professionals in what they do. It works. We've seen that it works. There's no shortage of funding and attempts to disrupt these gangs already. We've just spoken about some of the kit and equipment that the French authorities have on the north coast, dealing with preventing the launching. Night vision goggles. It's a militarised coastline, quite frankly. What more can be added to those
Smashing the gangs has been an EU-wide project for years and a UK project as well. All you got from Starmer, I think, is, you know, a bit more investment and a few more officers and administrators and all the rest of it.
A few nail bars were
probably a couple of nail bars and maybe barbers' shops. But ultimately, how can this hurt Starmer in the years ahead? Will it sort of paint a picture of a Prime Minister that's not in control of his own country?
That'll almost certainly be how it appears to many voters. If you can't stop those accessing and leaving your country, then how much control do you really have? And I think for a lot of the Labour strategy we've seen in the first couple of months has been to blame the malaise in the country on 14 years of Tory rule. On this point, they have many easy arguments to push on that line, in particular even on the detention estate. Now, 10 years ago, we had 4,000 beds available to process failed asylum seekers and to send them back. We have now about 2,300 at a time when the demand on those facilities and our state capacity has absolutely surged through the roof.
But Dawn, hand on heart, how many Labour backbenchers? Let's not forget Labour are now the governing party of this country. How many Labour backbenchers, hand on heart, really want to stop the boats?
Well, about as many as the people in France want to stop the boats.
Exactly. I reckon you could probably fit them all in a Mini. I mean, this is an issue with our governing party, isn't it? Don't you think philosophically, ideologically, Charlie, the Labour movement are not that fussed about these illegal crossings?
Well, the Labour movement has close ties with NGOs and charities involved in this space. I think there are two lines of criticism that Keir Starmer's facing this morning. From the right, which is the claim that this current strategy isn't working. He hasn't got a Rwanda-style deterrent. This border security unit isn't up and running as of yet. And those NCA investigators, how much effect will they have? Do we have control of our borders? That's the standard line coming from the right. But also there's quite a lot of criticism coming from the left, from Amnesty International, other associated NGOs and charities, saying what they need is safe and legal routes to skip the procedure that might lead people to want to be smuggled over the channel. Why not let them come directly, apply through some processing unit elsewhere, apply online? That's also the perspective potentially being pushed by the French Interior Minister last night. He wants a new relationship between the EU and Britain on asylum policy.
Is that a deal to accept 100,000 a year?
Well, I don't. Whatever the deal is,
Keir Starmer has said that's not going to be part of the deal.
And it wouldn't be politically feasible for Keir Starmer anyway.
And lots of you feel very, very strongly about this. Darren says the French need to be using harpoons and drag those boats back to the beach. Lots of you agreeing with that. And Wendy says, I agree. We've treated these illegal invaders like honoured guests. Free hotels, free meals, free money, free clothing, free smartphones, and of course bikes, so they can get to the black market jobs. No chance of deportation. Yes, it's our government's fault. And Political Mess says, I've given up. They are never going to stop this illegal migration. Lots of people feeling very strongly about this.
I got one quick comment. I spoke to Tony Smith, the former Director General of UK Border Force, this morning, and he said the only way that they can stop this smuggling operation and really deter people without Rwanda is to collect people in the water and return them to France. That's what the UK Border Force and the associated authorities need the powers to do. Until then, he said, the people smugglers will continue to work.
Exactly that.
Well, as Dawn said, those watching and listening are furious about what's happening. Let's be honest, if you don't control your borders, you have no control over the country. A major and growing political headache for Sir Keir Starmer. Yes, he's inherited it from the Conservatives, but it's his problem now, and he's got to fix it. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Myself and the lovely Dawn Neeson. Lots more coming up on today's show.
Prince Harry is reportedly ready to help out with royal duties if King Charles asks him, but he won't return unless his brother William apologises.
Oh, my goodness. Hell will freeze over first. Lots more to get through. Are Labour waging war on aspiration by scrapping Margaret Thatcher's right to buy? Lots to come. Prince Harry next, but first, the headlines with GB News royalty, someone that will never leave the family, Sam Francis.
Mark, Dawn, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you. Just coming up to 32 minutes past 1. And the headlines this hour. The Grenfell Tower fire, which killed 72 people, was the result of decades of failure. That's according to a long-awaited report. Over almost 1,700 pages, that report reveals how missed opportunities by the government, building companies, contractors and council staff turned Grenfell into what's been described as a death trap. Families and survivors of the deadly blaze 7 years ago say that today's final and damning report shows they were failed by calculated dishonesty and greed.
We paid the price of systematic dishonesty, institutional indifference and neglect. The government ignored warnings about dangerous cladding from as early as 1991. It knew the risks but failed to prevent them, revealing the greed and profiteering of an industry that has been poorly regulated by governments over decades.
Rishi Sunak, now leader of the opposition, has attacked Labour's move to axe the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. He was facing off with Sir Keir Starmer at the first Prime Minister's questions since Parliament returned from the summer recess. And the Conservative leader accused the Prime Minister of taking money from low-income pensioners and ploughing it into inflation-busting pay rises for union workers.
His decision, and his decision alone, to award a train driver on £65,000 a pay rise of almost £10,000. And it was also his decision that a pensioner living on just £13,000 will have their winter fuel allowance removed. So can the Prime Minister explain to Britain's low-income pensioners why he has taken money away from them whilst at the same time given more money to highly paid train drivers?
However, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer defended that decision to cut winter fuel payments. He says it's essential to stabilise the economy.
We've had to take tough decisions to stabilise the economy and repair the damage, including targeting winter fuel payments whilst protecting pensioners. 800,000 pensioners are not taking up pension credit. We intend to turn that around. We're going to align housing benefit and pension credit, something the previous government deferred year after year after year. And because of our commitment to the triple lock, pensions are projected to increase by over £1,000 in the next 5 years.
And as we were just hearing from Charlie Peters, our national reporter, hundreds of migrants have attempted to cross the Channel just hours after 12 people, including, sadly, a pregnant woman and 6 children, died when their boat sank. Earlier, French police were seen storming a beach to stop around 200 others from making that crossing this morning. Dramatic footage also showed people wading out into the water, many of them not wearing life jackets, before pushing away from the shore. Over 30 people have died in crossings this year as concerns grow about overcrowded boats, increasing the risk of fatalities. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, let's take a look at the markets for you this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.3112 and €1.1868. The price of gold, £1,899 and 9 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,261 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Sunshine and showers for most of us today. Some of those showers could be quite heavy across northwestern areas, but in any sunshine, it will still feel fairly warm. We've got high pressure building in for northern areas as we head towards the weekend, but before then, a number of weather fronts still bringing some outbreaks of rain throughout today. So across eastern areas, it will stay quite cloudy through a lot of today. There's a risk of some quite heavy showers breaking out in the southeast later on this afternoon, but elsewhere across southern areas of Scotland, we've already had some quite heavy showers today, and we could see some further heavy downpours later on this afternoon, as well as across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. So it is a fresher day than yesterday, but there will be some sunny intervals and the winds are quite light, so it will feel pleasant enough if you do catch any sunshine. Now, as we head into this evening, still pretty cloudy across eastern areas of Scotland, some drizzly rain coming into parts of Aberdeenshire. Still a risk of some quite heavy showers further west, but generally that's where the best chance of any sunshine across parts of Scotland is later on today, and sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland, as well as some heavy downpours. Now in Wales, the west coast is where we'll see the best of the sunshine. Further inland, a risk of some cloudier skies, and across the south coast as well, a mix of cloudy skies and outbreaks of rain. And it's overnight tonight across southern areas where that rain will start to turn quite heavy. There is a weather warning in force for all of Thursday. Now, the heavy rain will likely last all the way through Friday and into Saturday as well, actually. So we could see quite a lot of rain falling across southern areas. That may bring some trouble on the roads first thing on Thursday, but it's further north where things start to become more settled. So a drier night across parts of northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a fine start to the day on Thursday across these areas. And there'll be plenty of sunshine too, and it'll feel fairly warm in that sunshine. Highs of around 21 or 22 degrees across western Scotland, northwestern England. Further south though, much fresher and damper day.
The latest GB News travel.
Eastbound on the M62, there's queue in traffic to an earlier accident at Haywood from 19 through to Rochdale at junction 20. All lanes have reopened, but traffic remains. Anti-clockwise on the M25, there are long delays to an accident, even though the vehicles are on the hard shoulder, just after 29 for Romford and Basildon. Delays at Lakeside at 30. Clockwise on the M25, all traffic is being temporarily held to a broken down vehicle at Leatherhead, junction 9, and it's slow for the southbound side of the M6 to an earlier broken down vehicle from 19 for Knutsford through to junction 18. Again, all lanes have reopened, but traffic remains. Finally, the eastbound side of the M56, an earlier vehicle needed a tyre changed at 10 for Stretton. That's cleared, all lanes have reopened and traffic on the move. So that's the very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, a good afternoon, and welcome indeed to Good Afternoon Britain. I'm Dawn Neeson and here's Mark Dolan. Now, we're going to talk royals, but before, we've got some cracking messages coming in from you, so please do keep them coming. Lots of them are getting very angry about migration.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
This from Y. Decker, who is a GB News member, who says... Mark and Dawn's safe and legal routes will not help with economic migrants who will still cross the channel. Dennis says, unlike most other European countries, we are in the fortunate position of being an island. Therefore, with the political will, our borders could and should be made virtually watertight. But, of course, that's the issue. The political will is not there, Dawn.
It isn't, actually. And Mandy, on similar lines, says, stop border fast and the RNLI going out and picking them up. They are not in difficulty whilst in a dinghy. Well, I mean, some did lose their lives, but, you know, I understand your point, Mandy. And meanwhile, Gary says the French are correct. At least in part, it is our fault that migrants want to come here. We make it too attractive. They know they'll be treated very well, and therefore it's worth the risk.
I mean, the issue is, and I was listening to a guest from Migration Watch on the channel yesterday, and they were asked about the idea of the Navy turning these boats away, which might have a sort of a logic to it, and certainly in historic terms that would have happened. However, the issue you've got is criminal liability, because these these boats are very fragile, and if there were fatalities, then the consequences
and they
could be
get back
severe.
to France, and the French will go, none. Right, meanwhile, talking about passports, this is linked. Bertie, hi Bertie, says, I would like to see Harry have his title and passport taken away, which we're moving on to now. Seamless link.
Too right.
The royal rift rages on as reports emerge that Prince Harry will not return to royal duties unless his brother William apologises. However, the Duke of Sussex said he would be open to a temporary role and willing to help out the firm if his father asked him to.
Yes, this comes after it was revealed last week that Harry has turned his back away from Hollywood publicists and texted former confidants from his old life on how to plan a return from the US.
Right, OK, we're joined now by former senior gardener at Highgrove, Jack Stooks. Jack, thank you very much for joining us. I've got to bet you've got some tales to tell. First of all, Jack, why should William apologise? What is he apologising for?
This is one of the big questions that even I'm thinking is we're hearing reports that supposedly he wants William to apologise for something. None of us know what it is. None of us have actually heard Harry say he wants an apology, so we don't quite know what's going on with that, who's saying what. And we're hearing, obviously, again, reports that it's an old confidant, and yet nobody's saying, oh, it's actually this person. So we can't actually go to them and say, listen, what's going on? Apart from asking Harry sort of to his face if we see him. But I do feel that there's probably apologies from both sides. Things haven't probably been as easy as we all sort of see it. We sort of see Harry decided to leave, Harry decided to write a book, everything's Harry's fault, and he must just disappear forever. But there's a lot more to it, and there is always more sides to the story. It's a bit like a diamond with all the facets. There's so much more going on that none of us actually know. We also would... Sorry.
Well, Jack, sorry to interrupt you, but with the best will in the world, what does Prince William, or indeed what does King Charles have to apologise for? It's Harry who has thrown his own family and the country under the bus with the Netflix TV series, the book Spare, and all of those podcast appearances.
I think at the time, he just wanted everybody to hear his side of the story, and he probably felt a little bit disgruntled with things happening the way they were happening. I know that the press were sort of pretty much, if I can say, going to town on just him, and everything he did was wrong, everything that Meghan did was wrong. And if you put yourself into those shoes for maybe, just a minute, and you sort of think to yourself, well, this is someone we all absolutely adored and loved to pieces. And suddenly, within like a fortnight, he was suddenly the most hated person in Britain. And it must be quite hard for anybody to have that happen to them and to sort of want to go, hang on a minute, I'm still the same person. I need to get my story heard, and no one's listening to me. And every time I open my mouth, somebody says something worse. So I think that's where probably the book came from, and the podcasts and the Netflix deals. And I mean, I'm not saying that, Meghan might have had something to do with it, obviously with Hollywood connections, and said, look, let's do the Oprah interview, let's do the Netflix deals, and obviously some of which I don't feel were right. I'm not completely on Harry's side with everything, but I do think that he probably did it for a reason, and those reasons we don't quite know and fully understand.
Jack, you must... did you remember the boys when they were little? I mean, did you sort of were you working there when they were little? Do you have memories of them?
Well, so I was at Highgrove for 21 years. Right. So I knew them when William was still at St Andrews. I knew obviously Harry as well. So got to know them from being at Highgrove. When they came home, and saw them as themselves. Saw them at the pub. Saw them drinking with all their friends. Got to know all their friends. It was a very much a family affair. Everybody knew them and left them alone in their local areas. And I think that's something that was really good for them to have that nice upbringing that I think they were lucky enough to have. And with Princess Anne, she's had the same with her family living quite nearby. So Yes, I did know him. Obviously, I knew William. I knew Kate. I didn't get to meet Meghan, though.
Okay, Jack, just very quickly, we're running out of time, unfortunately. So what do you make of Harry's decision to stay with Earl Spencer on his recent trip back rather than to stay in any of the royal palaces?
I think if he's maybe not invited, or if, for instance, the king is in Scotland at Balmoral, there may not have been that possibility for him to go and see family. And he thought, well, maybe if I'm up in Norfolk, I may as well go and see my mum's brother and actually see him. And maybe, you know, he's had some things he needed to say to his brother, to Diana's brother. Or because I think he's just currently going through a divorce, I think, if I'm not wrong. And so, you know, he might be going to sort of show support to him.
Jack, thank you very much. That's Jack Stooks, royal commentator and former royal gardener. Thank you very much for joining.
Tough gig, isn't it, being King Charles's gardener, given his enthusiasm for horticulture?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. You've got to get it right, haven't you? You don't want to get it wrong. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's show as reports emerge that Labour are set to tear up the right to buy policy. We're asking if they've waged war on aspiration. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you very soon.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin.
Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all. Really? It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is A Night with. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage. She's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in London.
Quite a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back, Mark Dolan and Dawn Neeson with you until 3 o'clock. Now, reports suggest that Angela Rayner is considering abolishing the right to buy scheme that was brought in, of course, by Margaret Thatcher in the 80s.
This is the right to buy scheme that Angela Rayner used to buy her property. Anyway, the Deputy Prime Minister...
about 40 grand in the process?
Did indeed, controversial. She did benefit from this, didn't she?
Which house was that? Let's not get into that
No, let's not go there. So she benefited from the scheme herself. So isn't this a classic case of pulling the housing ladder up behind you?
Most definitely. Well, this comes after research shows that more than 4 in 10 council homes sold under the right to buy scheme are now owned by private landlords.
Right, we are joined now by property expert Richard Blanco to explain what is going on here and what's being suggested. Richard, thank you for joining us. Lovely to see you this afternoon. Richard, what do you make of this suggestion from Angela Rayner?
Well, yes, I mean, she's launching a consultation, and I think part of the problem is that we've not been building enough council homes. In fact, we've lost 165,000 in the last 10 years. And the concern has been that council homes continue to be sold and not enough are built. The Housing Select Committee last January said that they thought 95,000 should be built every year, and we're just not meeting those kind of numbers. There was a net loss of 14,000 in the last year that there are figures for. Now, whether or not she would be brave enough to abolish the right to buy, I'm not sure. It's something that we've had since 1980. It's a policy that's really cut through. Everyone knows about it. Of course, one of Margaret Thatcher's most famous policies. I think what might happen is she might kind of cut back on it so that perhaps you can only buy council, local authority homes and not housing association homes, or there might be a kind of review of the discounts, or indeed there might be a pause whilst local authorities get a chance to start building some more.
Indeed. Richard, what's your view about right to buy? Has it been good or bad for Britain?
Well, it's been great for people wanting to buy their own home, and of course that was the original aim. Some people would argue that it actually created the housing crisis because we lost 1.5 million council homes between 1979 and 1995. Now, the problem was that they weren't replaced, and I think if they were replaced, if they had been, we wouldn't have the huge shortage of properties that we've got now. Of course, the government wants to build 370,000 per annum going forward to try and build up the housing stock. So I always feel a bit torn on this because I think it is an important part of aspiration for people to want to buy their own home. And of course, one of the challenges for social tenants is that, yes, you're paying a low rent, but because you're never going to buy your own home, you're not building up any capital to pass on to your children. So it isn't, the opportunity to actually buy your own home is an important aspirational thing. But I think we haven't always got the policy right. We need to make sure that we replace those properties that are sold.
Richard, so you mentioned it briefly there. The idea may be to pause the right to buy scheme while we build some of those 370,000 houses a year. And how's that going, by the way? And then reinstate it afterwards when we've got a few more properties?
Possibly. I mean, we built 160,000 in the last year, so we're way behind the target. Exactly. And of course, we can't just suddenly ramp up house building. We've got all sorts of other issues going on. Interest rates are still quite high, which is, making it tricky for people to get a mortgage. There are all kinds of issues about not having enough labour, enough skills actually to build all of these houses. So it's going to take a while, really, for this massive house building programme to get off the ground. Like I say, I think if Angela Rayner did stop right to buy, it's been in place since 1980. Okay. It's going to be a really big political bombshell.
Richard Blanco, thank you so much for joining us. Busy next hour, Dawn. PMQs, Rishi Sunak taking chunks out of Keir Starmer. All of that next.
See you soon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Sunshine and showers for most of us today. Some of those showers could be quite heavy across northwestern areas, but in any sunshine, it will still feel fairly warm. We've got high pressure building in for northern areas as we head towards the weekend, but before then, a number of weather fronts still bringing some outbreaks of rain throughout today. So across eastern areas, it will stay quite cloudy through a lot of today. There's a risk of some quite heavy showers breaking out in the southeast later on this afternoon, but But elsewhere across southern areas of Scotland, we've already had some quite heavy showers today, and we could see some further heavy downpours later on this afternoon, as well as across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. So it is a fresher day than yesterday, but there will be some sunny intervals, and the winds are quite light, so it will feel pleasant enough if you do catch any sunshine. Now, as we head into this evening, still pretty cloudy across eastern areas of Scotland. Some drizzly rain coming into parts of Aberdeenshire. Still a risk of some quite heavy showers further west, but generally that's where the best chance of any sunshine across parts of Scotland is later on today. And sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland, as well as some heavy downpours. Now in Wales, the west coast is where we'll see the best of the sunshine. Further inland, a risk of some cloudier skies, and across the south coast as well, a mix of cloudy skies and outbreaks of rain. And it's overnight tonight across southern areas where that rain will start to turn quite heavy. There is a weather warning in force for all of Thursday. Now, the heavy rain will likely last all the way through Friday and into Saturday as well, actually. So we could see quite a lot of rain falling across southern areas. That may bring some trouble on the roads first thing on Thursday, but it's further north where things start to become more settled. So a drier night across parts of northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a fine start to the day on Thursday across these areas. And there'll be plenty of sunshine too, and it'll feel fairly warm in that sunshine. Highs of around 21 or 22 degrees across western Scotland, northwestern England. Further south though, much fresher and damper day.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
And good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 4th of September. I'm Mark Dolan, and she is the fabulous Dawn Neeson.
Steady on. Right, OK, now Grenfell's inquiry final report has shamed the government, accusing them of ignoring constant warnings about the building's safety. The families of the victims have also said they suffered institutional indifference from those charged with protecting their homes.
Yes, more on that shortly. Plus, the Prime Minister faced Rishi Sunak for the first time since the summer recess, with the leader of the opposition accusing Starmer of choosing train drivers over vulnerable pensioners. Sir Keir Starmer was also questioned on Israel, and tax rises. Will have all of the fallout from a very feisty PMQs next.
And a good news story. British tennis star Jack Draper prepares for the biggest game of his career so far after reaching the quarterfinals of the US Open. We'll speak to his former coach this hour.
Yes, indeed. Let us know your thoughts throughout the next hour. gbnews.com/your say. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Mark, Dawn, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 2. We'll start with Prime Minister's questions, and Rishi Sunak, now the leader of the opposition, has attacked Labour's move to axe the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. He faced off with Sir Keir Starmer at that first meeting since Parliament returned from the summer recess, and the Conservative leader accused the Prime Minister of taking money from low-income pensioners and ploughing it into inflation-busting pay rises for some union workers.
It was his decision, and his decision alone, to award a train driver on £65,000 a pay rise of almost £10,000. And it was also his decision that a pensioner living on just £13,000 will have their winter fuel allowance removed. So can the Prime Minister explain to Britain's low-income pensioners why he has taken money away from them whilst at the same time given more money to highly paid train drivers?
However, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, defended that decision to cut winter fuel payments. He says it's essential to stabilise the economy.
We've had to take tough decisions to stabilise the economy and repair the damage, including targeting winter fuel payments whilst protecting pensioners. 800,000 pensioners are not taking up pension credit. We intend to turn that around. We're going to align housing benefit and pension credit, something the previous government deferred year after year after year. And because of our commitment to the triple lock, pensions are projected to increase by over £1,000 in the next 5 years.
In other news this afternoon, the Grenfell Tower fire, which killed 72 people, was the result of decades of failure, a long-awaited report has found. Over almost 1,700 pages, that Grenfell report reveals how missed opportunities by the government, building companies, contractors and council staff turned the building into what's been described as a death trap. Families and survivors of the deadly blaze, now 7 years ago, say today's final and damning report shows they were failed by calculated dishonesty and greed.
We paid the price of systematic dishonesty, institutional indifference and neglect. The government ignored warnings about dangerous cladding from as early as 1991. It knew the risks but failed to prevent them, revealing the greed and profiteering of an industry that has been poorly regulated by governments over decades.
And just a breaking line to bring you from South East London. We're hearing from the London Fire Brigade that around 70 firefighters are battling another blaze at a tower block in Catford, that's in the southeast of the city. That fire broke out on the 9th and 10th floors, with some images on social media at this stage showing smoke pouring from that building. The London Fire Brigade's also confirmed it has received at least 50 emergency calls, deploying now 10 fire engines to that scene. At this stage, we don't know the cause of that fire, but of course that incident coincides with the release today of that final report from the Grenfell Tower inquiry that sadly claimed 72 lives. So that latest line just coming to us from South East London, 70 firefighters on the scene of a blaze at a tower block in Catford. As soon as we get images, we will bring them straight to you. Well, hundreds of migrants have attempted to cross the Channel just hours after 12 people, including a pregnant woman and 6 children, died when their boat sank. Earlier, French police stormed a beach to stop around 200 others from attempting the crossing. And dramatic footage also showed people wading into the water, many not wearing life jackets, before pushing away from the shore. Over 30 people have died in crossings so far this year as concerns grow about overcrowding boats, increasing fatal risks. 4 of the 5 children arrested over the murder of 8-year-old Bim Coley have been released without charge. Coley was attacked while walking his dog in Franklin Park near Leicester on Sunday and sadly later died in hospital. A 14-year-old boy remains in police custody as their investigations continue. Well, that group, aged between 12 and 14, were initially arrested on suspicion of murder after a post-mortem revealed the victim died from a neck injury. Police now urging anyone with information about that attack to come forward. England's GP services face a critical tipping point, according to a new survey. Researchers from University College London found that while NHS workforce grew by 20% from 2015 to 2022, the number of GPs per 1,000 patients fell by 15%. GP practices also dropped by 20% over the last decade, despite a rise in patient registrations. Concerns are now growing over the increasing reliance on non-medical staff, with experts warning it could impact the quality of care, though the government has promised reforms, including hiring more GPs and raising their pay. Conservative MPs are set to kick off the first round of voting at around 3:30 this afternoon to choose a successor to Rishi Sunak. The initial ballot set for this afternoon will begin narrowing the field of 6 candidates, with further rounds throughout September, whittling the contenders down further. They include James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Dame Priti Patel, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Kemi Badenoch. An exam board is warning that GCSE students are taking too many exams and spending more than 30 hours in tests. That's among the highest globally. OCR, one of the main exam boards in the UK, is calling for a reduction in the number and the intensity of exams. Instead, they propose a shift towards a more balanced curriculum. That report is backed by education figures and comes as the government launches its own review into the curriculum and assessments. And finally, Sir Brian May has revealed he suffered a minor stroke last week, which briefly impaired his arm. In an Instagram video, the 77-year-old said he's now doing OK, but won't be driving, flying or doing any strenuous activity. The Queen guitarist described the incident as a little scary, but praised the care he received from hospital staff. And he's also reassured fans he can still play guitar. Thank goodness. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
So very shortly, we will bring you reaction to Sunak versus Starmer at Prime Minister's questions, plus who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And does anyone care? Because you don't, do you?
Do you care? gbnews.com/yoursake. Because I don't, to be honest with you. You've got 5 years to sort it out. And I'm sick of them arguing. They're like kids in a playground arguing.
I'm not sure any of them have star quality, but we'll ask Olivia Utley, our political correspondent, shortly. But let's start with the damning final report into the 2017 Grenfell Tower disaster that concluded the fire was the culmination of decades of failure by central government. Inquiry chairman Sir Martin Moore-Bick said all 72 deaths in Grenfell Tower were avoidable.
Joining us now is political correspondent Catherine Forster from outside the inquiry to bring us up to date. Catherine, hello. Right, OK, we know that the families have been giving a press conference this afternoon. Can you tell us what they've been saying?
Yes, good afternoon to both of you. This report, so long in the making. The families, there's been a couple of press conferences, one of them a little bit earlier. They basically said that the inquiry proved what we already know, that the deaths were avoidable. We'll never give up fighting for you. There's another press conference going on at the moment in the hotel behind me here in West London. Let's have a little look now at some of what's been said.
The warning signs that were emerging from as early as 1991 that some kinds of materials, in particular aluminium composite material panels with unmodified polyethylene cores, were dangerous. We find that there was a failure on the part of the government and others to give proper consideration at an early stage to the dangers of using combustible materials in the walls of high-rise buildings.
Apologies, that was, of course, a clip from the inquiry. That was Sir Martin Moore-Bick speaking. I thought that we were throwing it to a bit from the press conference. But as you can see, he has admitted that there were decades of failure, that the concerns about this cladding was known for many, many years and frankly was ignored. Now, the relatives do not feel that this inquiry really has achieved much. And in the hotel behind me, they have been talking, and the repeated theme is, we still have no justice. Many of them feel that they didn't ask for the inquiry, that it's delayed justice. What they really want to see is people held accountable. They want to see people locked up, people in jail, because the inquiry has said that the victims, the families, were failed through incompetence, but in some cases by dishonesty and greed. We know, for example, that the manufacturers of the cladding and the insulation knew that it wasn't suitable for use in high-rise buildings, and the regulators helped to sort of allow them to pass the test. It was insufficiently regulated. There's a lot of blame going round, and the families feel that they know, and they've known for a long time, what went wrong. They want people punished. Obviously, nothing can ever make up for the terrible, terrible loss of their relations. Now, the police are apparently investigating 19 organisations. 58 individuals are being investigated, but any criminal proceedings won't begin until at least 2026, we're told. So any prosecutions, and it's been made clear that that's going to be very difficult, could be 2027, which would be a full 10 years since this tragedy which happened, which took 72 lives in West London.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much. That's Catherine. Bring us up to date on the Grenfell Tower inquiry, which finalised this morning. Now, more politics. PMQs is back following the summer recess. There was no holding back, as Starmer said. Labour had inherited absolute chaos from the Conservatives. Well, Rishi Sunak hit back, saying the Prime Minister has to start taking responsibility for his own decisions. Let's speak to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, now, who joins us from Westminster. Hi, Olivia. OK, what did you make of the first PMQ, then?
Well, beforehand, there was quite a lot of talk that Rishi Sunak would be the older statesman in the room, sort of loftily rising above Keir Starmer's, political tactics. Obviously, Rishi Sunak is about to step down as leader of the opposition, but he didn't feel like a dead duck opposition leader today. He was very much going for the jugular with Keir Starmer. He touched on two main issues, the first of which was winter fuel payments. Now, this is an issue which has caused real consternation within the Labour Party. Plenty of Labour MPs, even those who are on board with the general idea of limiting the winter fuel payments to a smaller group of pensioners, plenty of them feel like the cut-off, which is an income of £13,000, is just too low. And Rishi Sunak really capitalised on that today. Let's just have a listen.
No Prime Minister wants to do what we have to do in relation to the winter fuel allowance, but we have to take the tough decision to stabilise our economy to ensure that we can grow it for the future. And as I've said, we are working hard on pension credit. We're allowing housing benefits, which they didn't do for years, and over 5 years, this projected increase of up to £1,000 for those on pensions. We are tough decisions that they done.
So Keir Starmer's argument there is essentially that it's all the Conservatives' fault, that if Rishi Sunak hadn't left Labour with this enormous black hole in public finances, then the Labour Party wouldn't be forced into such a move. But you could see there on the backbenches there were a few Labour MPs not exactly cheering Keir Starmer on. The other issue where Rishi Sunak went pretty hard on Keir Starmer was the issue of Israel. And again, he chose this because this is an issue which is dividing the Labour backbenchers. Yesterday, David Lammy said that the British government would be halting 30 of its arms licences with Israel. Now, that has gone further than the US. The US has threatened to do this, but has actually stepped back, and Kamala Harris has said that it's not something she plans to do. The White House has said that it does not believe that Israel is breaking international law. So the fact that Britain has diverged with our greatest ally, the US, on this issue is causing definite consternation within the Labour Party, and there are even ministers suggesting that it's inappropriate for Keir Starmer to be doing this. So that's another issue where where Rishi Sunak was trying to sort of make a wedge between those new Labour MPs, because of course there are a lot of them now.
Well, indeed, I think it's terrible for Britain to be throwing a key ally like Israel under the bus when they're trying to stop another October the 7th from happening, and in the same week that they bury 6 hostages, of course, murdered in cold blood. But Olivia, can I ask you, do you think it was politically wise of the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, to pick a fight with millions of Britain's pensioners?
Well, it'll be really interesting to see if he ends up having to water this down a little bit. At the moment, Rachel Reeves is really digging her heels in, but we are still a month and a half off the budget, and there are plenty of Labour MPs who are furious, but plenty of those with big pensioner populations of constituents. The argument, I think, that Keir Starmer would say is essentially the Labour Party now has an enormous majority. It has the power to do sort of unpopular things to try and fix the public finances. Cutting the winter fuel allowance definitely comes under the umbrella headline of unpopular things to do. But that said, although Keir Starmer does have a big parliamentary majority, his personal popularity ratings in the country aren't actually that high at all. And when you look at the vote share from the election, Labour won with actually a relatively small share of the vote, smaller than Jeremy Corbyn won in 2017. Now, why does all that matter? Well, you could argue it doesn't really, with so many MPs on those backbenches behind them, almost as many as Tony Blair got in 1997. Keir Starmer will be able to just push through measures like this. But if there is sort of displeasure with the Labour leader on his own backbenches, potentially within his ministerial ranks as well, then you could see a situation where perhaps just months or maybe a couple of years down the line, Keir Starmer's leadership gets challenged from within the Labour Party.
Olivia, just quickly, one final question. Many viewers are getting in touch about this. Mrs. Dick Dastardly, great name. Up to now on the PMQs I'm watching on Catch-Up, they have not asked one single question about immigration, especially considering we saw in the channel yesterday. It seems to be banned from being discussed. What is going on?
Immigration is a very tricky issue for both parties. I was quite surprised that Rishi Sunak didn't bring it up, but I guess the weakness for the Conservative Party is that their silver bullet idea, the Rwanda policy, just didn't work. Boris Johnson first brought it up in June 2022, and by the time the election was called in May 2022, there still hadn't been any movement. Obviously, Keir Starmer has a totally different plan for fixing the illegal migration crisis. He threw Rwanda out of the window straight away, and instead has come up with a policy of smashing the gangs, tackling the gangs up source. I mean, that is something that is much easier said than done. Of course, the Conservative Party tried to smash the gangs when they were in power, but these are very nimble, agile gangs. There isn't sort of one leader you can just take out. They move up and down areas of the channel. They're very small, adaptable gangs. And he's also talked about having an army of civil servants sort of pushing forward. But again, is that really going to work? Rishi Sunak perhaps should have pressed him on that.
Definitely. Let's have a look at the Tory leadership race, if we can, Olivia. It's an academic affair at this stage. We're 4.5 years, most likely, away from a general election. But if it boils down to Robert Jenrick versus Kemi Badenoch, who wins?
That's a really good question. I've been speaking to a couple of Conservative MPs today who do think that it probably will boil down to Kemi Badenoch versus Robert Jenrick. Although I should just say that the contest still is wide open. Over half of Conservative MPs haven't yet declared who they're voting for. If it boils down to Jenrick versus Kemi Badenoch, my instinct is that Kemi would probably be more popular with members on that Conservative home list of the most popular cabinet members when the Conservatives were in government. Kemi Badenoch always came up very, very close to the top. So my instinct would be that Kemi would edge a win over Robert Jenrick. But as I say, it is still very, very wide open. We don't even know if those will be the final two on the ballot paper. This afternoon, we go down from 6 to 5. Not quite sure who's going to be knocked out yet. Could be Mel Stride, could be Priti Patel. Those are the names that we're hearing today.
Dawn, as a broadcaster, On TV and
Where's
radio.
this going?
Do you remember, I always used to call you the Queen of all media when you used to...
Queen of Fleet Street, I think it was at one point.
Previous publisher, a broadcaster. But listen, you've edited newspapers as well. What do you think? If it's Jenrick versus Badenoch, who's got the X factor in your view?
I think I agree with Olivia. I think when it comes down to the X factor for the Tory membership, who will ultimately decide on this, I think it will be Kemi Badenoch.
Why? What's she got that they like that Jenrick hasn't got?
She has got spherical objects.
OK.
She's got a personality and she's...
I've got a couple of those at home.
Yes, I know.
I bought them on eBay. Absolute bargain.
But no, I think she's got the she's up there and she says what people are thinking. But a lot of support coming in from you as well for Suella Braverman, interestingly.
Yeah, that's right. I think somebody's saying that she's what a real politician looks like. What about the timeline? I mean, this won't be resolved until November, will it, Olivia?
No, it won't be resolved until November, so we've got quite a long way of this to go. Today we will see those 6 candidates narrow down to 5 candidates. You have to get 40% of the vote, I think it is. So they will be whittled down, relatively quickly. And then when we have that final 2, it will go to the members. The Conservative members are a very fickle group of voters, as Conservative MPs have been saying to me today. Of course, they famously voted in Liz Truss back in 2022. So although Kemi Badenoch does seem to be the most popular at the moment, we could see that all change very, very quickly indeed. On the whole, a good rule of thumb is that the Conservative membership will pick the most sort of right-wing candidate going. They are all, you can see at the moment, trying to show their credentials as that most right-wing candidate going. Kemi Badenoch, at the moment, edging into first place. But Robert Jenrick, who, of course, resigned from Rishi Sunak's government over not feeling that the Rwanda policy was tough enough, might end up just pipping her at the post.
Brilliant stuff. I've got to say, thank you very much, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. Dawn, I happen to think that Kemi Badenoch would eviscerate Keir Starmer at the dispatch box. I think that it would basically be a bloodbath every PMQs because his woke identity politics wouldn't work on Kemi Badenoch, would
No, she doesn't suffer fools gladly, which I think is why a lot of people are fans of hers. But William says Jenrick or Suella, Kemi is a big no for me.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There you go. I've got to say, we've been giving the Prime Minister a bit of a duffing up this afternoon, but the bottom line is it is worth pointing out that the economic chaos is something that they have inherited from the Tories. The bottom line is the country is broke. That did not happen on the watch of Labour. And the migrant crisis is something that's also been presented to the Prime Minister, and let's hope he can get it sorted pretty quickly.
Good luck with that one. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Jack Draper is playing in the quarter-finals of the US Open tonight against Australia's Alex de Minaur. Will he take his place as the new ace of British tennis? See what I did there, Mark? We're posing that question.
You smashed it.
To his... Oh, it's a love match. We're posing that question to his former coach after this very short break. We'll see you soon.
Tie break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
EasyJet is launching a new recruitment drive focused on attracting cabin crew members over 50 and those even considering retirement.
Well, the initiative is called Returnships and is inspired by research that suggests that 75% of people over 50 years old believe that now is the ideal time to embark on a new career.
Joining us now to discuss what it takes to embark on a second career as cabin crew is Helen Williams. Good morning, Helen.
Hi, good morning, Helen.
Welcome. Just touching down in our studio.
It is. I've had a few days off and now I'm here.
So you are now cabin crew.
I am.
What inspired you to get into it? What did you do before? How did it all come around?
Oh, so when I graduated, I took an office job with my grad scheme, and that job lasted 6 months, and I started working for a European carrier. I did just over 5 years at that European carrier and had an absolutely fabulous time. I then went on to a wet lease operation with an Irish carrier and another mainline UK carrier. I then decided to have time out. I had a business, I had a family, I had children, and last autumn I decided, why not? Let's go back and do it all again. So returning to that European carrier that I'd worked at when I was in my early 20s.
And what is that like for you now, returning that bit older, having that life experience, having your children, do you think that's been a benefit to you?
It's absolutely been a benefit. I mean, the amount of parents that thank me for helping me with their small children when they're crying on a flight. I am that person now.
When you went back for a second time, did you notice more sort of older people amongst your sort of colleagues?
I did. So when I returned onto my initial course in March of this year, just over half the course were over the age of 30.
Wow.
Which was absolutely phenomenal. And I was expecting to return and be with a lot of younger, 18, 19, 24. I was expecting to be that dinosaur. And that first day of training, to find out that I wasn't the dinosaur, you have no idea how exciting that was. And they've gone on, that particular group, to be phenomenal crew members.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Now, tennis. British tennis player Jack Draper has secured a first Grand Slam quarter-final appearance tonight against Alex de Minaur.
However, Draper has previously lost the last 3 games to his rival that he's playing tonight.
And so will the British number 1 be able to defeat de Minaur tonight and make it through to the semis? We're joined now by former coach to Jack Draper, Justin Sherring. Justin, thank you very much for joining us. We have just lost Justin.
Do you know why? He's gone for a loo break or something like that. Or maybe he's gone to get new balls.
We've got him back.
I'm here, guys. Yeah, I'm here. How you doing? Yeah, I'm good.
There you go. That was a net call. Justin, great to have you on the show. What kind of lad is Jack Draper? Tell us about the boy.
Well, I coached him, pretty much every day from 6 to 15. So I grew up with him, he grew up with me, and I tell you what, he's just a bit of an animal. If you think that Andy Murray wants to win, he's just passed the baton straight to another killer who wants to win as well. Jack wants to play tennis more than anything else in the world, but winning at anything is probably more important.
And what's his temperament? Is he good at managing his emotions, or is he feisty out there on the court?
You got to be feisty. If you can't get your emotions up to a point where you can do some outrageous things, then there's no chance. Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, we know the players that have been around us these last sort of 10 years. And without the intensity, without the emotional explosiveness that you're trying to manage somehow in your body, you're not going to compete at the highest level. So Jack does a great job at managing his emotions, despite the fact that he wants to win more than anything else on the planet.
He's been called the new Andy Murray, hasn't he? And Andy Murray, we understand, is a huge fan of his as well. Is there a comparison we can draw?
Yeah, they both, they both, as I say, they both want to win. They're both really smart on the tennis court. They both figure out their opponents, and they both also get incredibly nervous. And they show that at times over the last couple of years. Jack's shown that he's nervous, and I think they both had their little few issues with getting so nervous that it drains them of their energy, and they can look a bit fatigued on the court. But you imagine you go to New York and you've got those big stadiums and you got all those people watching. It might take like 2 or 3 years for you to really get your head around it. But now that Jack's got his head around it, yeah, his tennis will do the talking.
Justin, as he progresses, hopefully, through the tournament, he will become a household name. How do you think he'll cope with fame?
Honestly, he won't mind me saying this. He'll love it. He'll love it because it's a platform to do good stuff. It's a platform to talk about things that he really cares about. It's an opportunity to show the kids what a great role model looks like. It's an opportunity to talk about nerves. It's an opportunity to talk about hard work, all the things that he really values. And I think he'll embrace it. And I think he'll be great for the living rooms. He'll be great.
Justin, how far can he go in this tournament?
Why not? Look, if he serves really well, I don't know how much you know about the game. If he serves really well and he backs himself, he's as good as anyone in the world.
You know, the thing I really like about him is he keeps it real as well, doesn't he? He's a big Man United fan and a big Oasis fan. Can we ask him if he's got any tickets and would he like to sell them?
Well, he's probably got access to tickets, but growing up, I'm a big Liverpool fan, so Liverpool and Manchester United, that was always a topic of, you know, great sort of, you know, discussion on the tennis court. But I always asked him as well, I said, is it a penalty for Man United to win the Champions League, or is it an ace to win Wimbledon? And he always said it was an ace to win Wimbledon.
Well, listen, Justin, Jack Draper has already had a really stellar career. He's only 22. He's got a big future, and you deserve some of the accolades for that, because you coached him for many years from a youngster. So congratulations to you, and we'll all be rooting for him at 5 o'clock tonight in the United States. Our thanks to former coach to Jack Draper, Justin Sherring, who I do think could help me with my forehand. What do you reckon?
I think anyone could help with your forehand. It's frankly dreadful.
I've always had a problem with the wrist action.
I'm not going there. Don't even tempt me. Don't tempt me. You know what I'm like. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GBNews, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Now, around 200 migrants have tried to leave the French shores for the UK this morning.
Scandal.
And that follows the death of 12 trying to cross the English Channel yesterday, and an admission from former PM Sir Tony Blair, who said the influx of migrants under his premiership placed strain on communities. Right, coming up now, though, we're thrown to the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 2:30, the top story this afternoon. The Grenfell Tower fire, which killed 72 people, was the result of decades of failure, a long-awaited report has found. Over almost 1,700 pages, that Grenfell report reveals how missed opportunities by the government, companies, contractors and council staff turned the building into what's been described as a death trap. Families and survivors of that deadly blaze, now 7 years ago, say that today's final and damning report shows they were failed by calculated dishonesty and greed.
We paid the price of systematic dishonesty, institutional indifference and neglect. The government ignored warnings about dangerous cladding from as early as 1991. It knew the risks but failed to prevent them, revealing the greed and profiteering of an industry that has been poorly regulated by governments over decades.
Rishi Sunak, now the leader of the opposition, has attacked Labour's move to axe the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. He faced off with Sir Keir Starmer at the first Prime Minister's questions since Parliament returned from the summer recess. And the Conservative leader accused the Prime Minister of taking money from low-income pensioners and instead putting it towards inflation-busting pay rises for union workers.
His decision, and his decision alone, to award a train driver on £65,000 a pay rise of almost £10,000. And it was also his decision that a pensioner living on just £13,000 will have their winter fuel allowance removed. So can the Prime Minister explain to Britain's low-income pensioners why he has taken money away from them whilst at the same time given more money to highly paid train drivers?
However, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, defended his decision to cut winter fuel payments. He says it's essential to stabilise the economy.
We've had to take tough decisions to stabilise the economy and repair the damage, including targeting winter fuel payments whilst protecting pensioners. 800,000 pensioners are not taking up pension credit. We intend to turn that around. We're going to align housing benefit and pension credit, something the previous government deferred year after year after year. And because of our commitment to the triple lock, pensions are projected to increase by over £1,000 in the next 5 years.
And hundreds of migrants have attempted to cross the English Channel just hours after 12 people, including a pregnant woman and 6 children, sadly died when their boat sank yesterday. Earlier this morning, French police stormed a beach to stop around 200 others from attempting that crossing. And dramatic footage also showed people wading into the water, many of them not wearing life jackets, before pushing away from the shore. So far this year, over 30 people have died in that crossing, as concerns now grow about overcrowded boats increasing the risk of fatalities. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Sophia Wensler will have your next update at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Sunshine and showers for most of us today. Some of those showers could be quite heavy across northwestern areas, but in any sunshine it will still feel fairly warm. We've got high pressure building in for northern areas as we head towards the weekend, but before then a number of weather fronts still bringing some outbreaks of rain throughout today. So across eastern areas it will stay quite cloudy through a lot of today. There's a risk of some quite heavy showers breaking out in the southeast later on this afternoon, but elsewhere across southern areas of Scotland, we've already had some quite heavy showers today. We could see some further heavy downpours later on this afternoon, as well as across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. So it is a fresher day than yesterday, but there will be some sunny intervals and the winds are quite light, so it will feel pleasant enough if you do catch any sunshine. Now, as we head into this evening, still pretty cloudy across eastern areas of Scotland. Some drizzly rain coming into parts of Aberdeenshire. Still a risk of some quite heavy showers further west, but generally that's where the best chance of any sunshine across parts of Scotland is later on today. And sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland, as well as some heavy downpours. Now in Wales, the west coast is where we'll see the best of the sunshine. Further inland, a risk of some cloudier skies, and across the south coast as well, a mix of cloudy skies and outbreaks of rain. And it's overnight tonight across southern areas where that rain will start to turn quite heavy. There is a weather warning in force for all of Thursday. Now, the heavy rain will likely last all the way through Friday and into Saturday as well, actually. So we could see quite a lot of rain falling across southern areas. That may bring some trouble on the roads first thing on Thursday, but it's further north where things start to become more settled. So a drier night across parts of northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a fine start to the day on Thursday across these areas. And there'll be plenty of sunshine too, and it'll feel fairly warm in that sunshine. Highs of around 21 or 22 degrees across western Scotland, northwestern England. Further south though, much fresher and damper day.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland firstly. Issues on the A75 in Girth on that shut between Sand Green and the B796 turn-off. Two vehicles earlier on there involved in a collision, so still causing delays, that one. A westbound M62 from the A57, the Broadbottom and Mottram turn-off Hyde Road through towards Hyde at Junction 3. A lane shut there at the scene of an accident. At the earlier issue southbound in the M6 has gone just away from Wednesbury at 9, but still quite slow down towards the M5 turn off there, Junction 8 southbound. And queuing anti-clock for the M25. It slows up halfway between Lakeside Junction 30 and the Romford Basildon turn off there at Junction 29. Not up by an earlier broken down van. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Can this Labour government stop the boats? We'll debate that in just a moment, but lots more to come. Before that, Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney at 3 o'clock. And Ben, let me thank you for doing a remarkably brilliant job hosting Mark Dolan tonight. You've done an amazing, amazing effort, but you're back on air in 20 minutes' time. What's in your inbox?
You're very welcome, Mark. Thank you for the privilege of hosting your show. I hope you had a fantastic holiday as well, and your viewers are more than excited to have you back this weekend on my show in 20 minutes. I'm covering for Martin Daubney today and tomorrow. Of course, the big story is the Tory leadership vote, which takes place now. The results of the first vote will come within the first 30 minutes of my show from 3 p.m. So one of the six candidates, Badenoch, Mel Stride, Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, so on and so on, one of them will be going out today. Over the next 6 weeks, they'll be whittled down to just two candidates, and the members will then vote. So today, we will have the results of the very first Tory leadership race. One person is going to be evacuating the process, as they'd say on The Apprentice. Elsewhere, of course, 12 tragic migrant deaths in the Channel yesterday. Charlie Peters has some more up-to-date information on, unfortunately, more crossings today, Mark. More crossings despite the death yesterday.
The very brilliant and very busy Ben Leo is live at 3. Thank you, Ben.
Sounds like a cracking show, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, as Ben has just said, the breaking news is 100 migrants have crossed the Channel today, and that's after the tragedy we saw yesterday where 12 lost their lives, including women and children. A pregnant woman at that, to be honest with you. Right, OK, now, this comes as France calls for migrants to be able to claim UK asylum from within the EU. So, do we need a complete overhaul? What's going on? How can we stop it? And what's Tony Blair got to say about it all? But first of all, let's go to our national reporter, Charlie Peters. So, Charlie, 100 migrants still cross the Channel today.
Yeah, and that's so far today, because there's still plenty of time to go today. And often what we find with these, the pattern of crossings, you can get a flurry in the morning, a break for several hours, and then they go again in the early evening. So far, we think 4 boats have successfully made it close to UK waters. 3 have made it into our territory, and they've all been escorted, rescued off by Border Force and taken to Dover for processing. So this morning we had up to 16 arrived, then another 50, and just now one of the Border Force vessels has taken 65 over. So it's another triple-digit day for the small boat Channel crossings. This comes after, as you've just been mentioning, Dawn, that tragedy yesterday with a dozen killed, 6 of them children, 6 women of Eritrean background in French waters. That particular tragedy.
Charlie, the one thing lots and lots of people are asking, it seemed to be an inordinate number of women and children that died in that tragedy. Were there any men killed at all, do we know?
Oh, not as it stands. The information does seem to point that it's women and children so far. There are many factors as to what leads to these appalling situations when souls are lost at sea in that perilous journey. One of them potentially is the effects, actually, of the French authorities clamping down on the attempt by the people smugglers' gangs to get their boats out into the sea, because they've moved further south, away from Dunkirk and Calais, where drones and specialist night vision equipment has been used very effectively by the gendarmerie. I say very effectively. That's obviously wrong.
Not that effectively, actually.
It's a low bar, isn't it?
Hundreds of crossings successfully regularly, but they have disrupted, they say, some 60 to 70% of the crossings. So it could be much worse had that militarised coastline not be operational. But as I was saying, that is making more people move further south to Boulogne-sur-Mer, was where this tragedy happened yesterday. That's further away from the oversight from the authorities. Why is it women and children? Well, firstly, they're just less strong. So dealing with the perilous conditions they're dealing with, they're just, as an average, they're going to be more difficult and dangerous. But also think about how many issues we've seen recently with people trying to surge onto the boats once they've left. But that's often, as we've heard recently, been African migrants being involved in that process. Often it's been Iranians, Iraqis, Afghans being involved in this process, even people from Syria as well, still. Even a decade on from the Civil War, that route is still coming on. But it's recently African migrants trying to rush boats that have already been launched and having not paid the fee, leading to this crisis, potentially linked to that incident.
You know what, as far as the women and children thing is concerned, call me old-fashioned, but, you know, a real man would surely, you know, risk his own life trying to save his partner and his child.
Yeah, well, a real man possibly wouldn't bring the wife of their children or their children onto a people smuggling operation.
Yeah, fair point.
Well, we don't know. We don't know, obviously, whether you know, the men that were part of this tragedy didn't make an effort to save lives. Of course, though, we don't have all the details.
No.
Ultimately, it's a human tragedy. I mean, my position on the migrant crossings is that it's a humanitarian disaster. We saw that yesterday. It's a national security disaster, Charlie Peters, because I don't want to label everybody that enters the country illegally as a criminal, but if we don't have their details, if their documents and mobile phones are being thrown into the sea as they cross the channel, then we don't know who they are, what their background is. The authorities have pointed out that several suspected terrorists have been among those crossing the channel over the last couple of years. But it's an economic crisis too, isn't it? Because we have this figure of £7 or £8 million a day on hotel accommodation.
That's an odd figure. It's almost certainly much higher.
It's going up. And since the Labour government was elected, it's 8,000 people have entered the country illegally. So That figure could rise to 10, 15, 20 million pounds a day. At the moment, it's about 3 billion a year, which is more than the previous government's levelling up budget. This is a financial crisis as much as any other.
And it's a crisis, a financial crisis that goes on for many generations, because the cost of maintaining families, the right for people to be reunited with their families...
The cost of integration?
Well, indeed. And it's not necessarily the case that people coming over on small boats will be a net contributor to the economy. That's been, I think, an issue raised by some of the Conservative Party leadership candidates. They're looking at not just this issue immediately in terms of housing, hotels, the process to security and the policing and probation efforts, etc., and all the other asylum-linked requirements. They're looking at this as a long-term cost. What is the long-term cost to the state of people coming over on small boats? Are we getting the brightest and best from around the world? Is this a brain drain for Syria and Iraq? Or are these people not necessarily going to contribute to our economy? That's one perspective. You've also touched on the security issue, and I think that's really key, because this is a billion-dollar industry, the people smuggling operation. It's linked to all sorts of nefarious, alternative, organised criminal enterprises. There is clearly an opportunity here from people smuggling for terror actors and those who want to disrupt the security and safety of the United Kingdom. It is a major issue on so many levels.
Briefly, the government have got time to fix this, 4.5 years until the next election. Where do you think these numbers will be in a few years' time? Can Labour stop the boats?
Well, 2022 was a surge year. Last year was slightly less, but they're already on the way to beating it. Can they stop the boats? Only with a deterrent.
Interesting, yes, and they don't seem to have one at the moment.
Well, they've just ditched one, haven't they?
Well, quite. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters, bringing up today on the small boats crossing. 100 migrants today. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Coming up, are celebrity relationships all a
Can I just say that this celebrity relationship is the real deal? And Dawn is the one. I do hope Mrs. Dolan isn't watching. This comes as a document circulating online claims that Travis Kelce, who is a top sports star, and pop superstar Taylor Swift are in a PR relationship and are scheduled to split later this month. We'll have all the juicy details next.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Bad news for Liberal mothers who want to score virtue points by transitioning their kids, Lewis.
You know, this
tell us what it is.
Is a California dad is granted full custody of 4-year-old son after boy's mom tried to raise the child non-binary.
It's almost like cult-like behaviour. You've got the mother transitioning and then the transitioning the son as well. It's interesting that, you know, it's almost like a religion. You get, you know, if you're a Christian, your kids are probably going to be Christian. If you're, you know, Hindu, your kids are probably going to be Hindu. And if you're transgender, your kids are probably going to be transgender.
There's absolutely a causation there. We see plenty of times in videos. This is exactly it. And also we see the children of celebrities and people in particularly sort of liberal environments. It doesn't happen in some village in Indonesia or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, there's no such thing as a trans child. There's no such thing as non-binary. What there is are people with mental health issues and parents who want a virtual signal and also want to brainwash their children. This is an egregious example of that, where she was basically taking him to Disneyland, but he couldn't get on a ride unless he wore princess shoes. I mean, really evil, horrible stuff. You know, forced to wear a dress on his birthday. Just really nasty stuff. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the court going to him. No, that's not what happened. He took 800 pages of documentary evidence. He took 8 hours of police body camera footage showing this mental behaviour from the mother. And guess what? The courts ruled that the mum got him. They ruled against him. The only reason that he got custody of his child is because, thank God, a child protective services officer randomly got involved, looked into it themselves, and that's how he eventually got custody of the child.
Okay,
so the courts in America are utterly captured.
Josh,
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. We thought we'd finish with a bit of showbiz fluff for you.
I think so. Can I say I've enjoyed today thoroughly, and we are back tomorrow.
We are. Yeah,
12 till
sorry
3.
about that, yeah. But showbiz fluff. Taylor Swift's boyfriend, Travis Kelce, has called in lawyers after a strategic document spread online seems to show the relationship is a PR stunt.
Who knew? Yes, the paperwork seems to reveal a strategy for their breakup and says the date for an announcement is September the 28th.
It also outlines a supposed plan to release an official statement at the very end of the month, 3 days post-breakup.
Oh, dear. So are these celebrity relationships a sham? Are they just a business arrangement? Let's get the views of top showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecchi. Stephanie, what's the story here?
Oh, my gosh. Well, showmances are nothing new in the industry. I've known many showmances, but it tends to be in the case where both of them need to get something out of this relationship, whether it's a rising actress who needs more profile or whether it's a musician who's secretly in the closet but wants to appear straight. There's been so many showmances in the showbiz industry. But when it comes to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, we haven't thought this was a showbiz relationship in the sense where it's fake, because Taylor Swift has had many, many boyfriends in the past. She never really talks about her relationships unless it's in music. So to have this PR orchestrated breakup seems very unusual. We know that, at the end of a celebrity relationship, it only tends to be when there's a divorce at hand where most people get their agents involved to release a statement. For the breakdown of a relationship which is barely a year old, that's quite unheard of.
Stephanie, Taylor has been accused of this before, hasn't she? She was accused, her and Tom Hiddleston were accused of being in a showmance to divert attention away from her breakup with Calvin Harris. Please do keep up at the back there. She does have a lot of boyfriends, it has to be said.
She does have a lot of boyfriends, but I think it's more about Taylor getting bored of men quite quickly, more than her trying to boost her appeal. When it comes to Taylor Swift talking about her relationship, she puts it all in her music because that's where she wants the attention to come from. And with Travis Kelce and Taylor, they've been together for almost a year. They seem like quite in a happy relationship at the moment. So I find this quite odd. He's obviously come out and said that the documents have been forged and they're very unlawful and that he is getting his legal team to look into it. But, from what I've seen from this press release, it seems like it was written by a high school student, not professionals.
Briefly, Stephanie, do these showbiz romances work?
It's a bit hard, Mark, I would say, because you've got two people who have got egos, big egos, and they both want attention. They both want the limelight.
Sound familiar?
And it's hard. And sometimes you need someone who's actually out of the industry to make it work and for it to be more balanced and more like a traditional relationship. But we all love showbiz and we love the romance that goes with that.
And we love you. Stephanie Tecchi, thank you so much. This has been Good Afternoon Britain, but don't go anywhere because Ben Leo is up next in place of Martin Daubney. We're back tomorrow, but first, the all-important weather for you. I wonder what's happening. Here you go.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Some sunshine to come for some of us through the rest of the day, and out of the wind it's not feeling too bad, but for many of us a risk of showery outbreaks of rain through this evening. We're starting to see an easterly wind developing, particularly across parts of eastern Scotland, northeastern England, so that will drag in a bit more cloud, and with that northeasterly wind dragging showers down from the northwest through the Irish Sea, there's a risk of some showers across more southern areas of Wales, the west coast of England as well. We'll also see some rain intensify across the south coast of England, and there is a rain warning in force from around 9 o'clock this evening across southern areas all the way through until Friday evening. So it's the start of quite a wet period for southern areas through tonight. Further north, though, it is turning much drier, particularly across western areas of Scotland, where it will be a clear and pretty settled night, in fact. So temperatures will fall away into single figures. Not quite as cold as last night, but still a fairly chilly start. Lots of sunshine around first thing, though, across Northern Ireland. We could see this low cloud lingering across northeastern coasts of England, as well as the east coast of Scotland first thing. But it's across the south of England and southern areas of Wales where we'll see pulses of heavy rain through Thursday morning. And after some heavy rain overnight tonight, there could be some trouble on the road. So there is this weather warning in force. Please take a closer look at the Met Office website and app for more details on the warning. But the rain is likely to linger all through Thursday and into Friday. The best of the sunshine is going to be across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, and here temperatures could climb up to 22 degrees. Northwestern areas of England could also see some of those temperatures into the 20s as well, but the east coast still seeing quite a lot of cloud that will drag in further through Thursday evening, with rain persisting across the south. And the story remains pretty similar all the way through Friday and into the weekend, with more wet weather to come in the south and plenty of dry weather in the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to